No matter what you do within your business, sales is the biggest lever to pull in order to scale and grow. You can have the best product, the best marketing, but if you cannot sell, none of it matters. On today's podcast, I welcomed on Mark Stiving, who's the founder of Impact Pricing and the host of the Impact Pricing podcast. We sat down, we dissected my business. He put me on the spot and asked me questions that quite honestly makes most people feel uncomfortable, but you know what? I'm going to go back to the drawing board and think about how I can impact and influence my business. We go through real concepts as to what makes the difference in pricing, why businesses put 99, 69, 49 on the end of their pricing, what point that really changes in business, how it is different between B2C sales and B2B sales, and a lot more. This man has a PhD in marketing and has spent the last 25 plus years incessantly, obsessively studying pricing. If you want to increase your sales, your business, listen to this podcast. Thank you.
As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Jay Testori, and the Grappling Growth podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy.
Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Joe. It's going to be fun. Well, at least I hope.
I'm sure it will be. Mark, I'm curious. I ask the same question every single podcast to start off. What does growth look like to you?
Okay, I'm going to answer it in two ways, if I may. First off, you have to understand I'm semi-retired, so I don't worry about growing my business anymore. I just do the things I want to do. But when I think about growth, I'm going to think of it for me personally, and I'll think of it for my clients, people that I still work with. So for me personally, I think growth is having new ahas. It is thinking new thoughts that put pieces together that I never understood before. I am writing so many books right now, it isn't funny. And I find it so fascinating because I keep grabbing new knowledge and putting it on top of what I know. And it is amazing. I love doing what I'm doing right now. The other side to growth, I would say, is for my clients. And I wanted to define it this way because it's probably different than anything you've ever heard. I'm going to define growth as increasing your buyer's willingness to pay. Because when you can increase your buyer's willingness to pay, A, you're going to win more buyers, and B, they're going to pay you more money. And so to me, that's really all I think about is what is it that buyers are willing to pay? How do we get there? How do we figure that out? And how do we influence it?
So just talking about that subject of buyers' willingness to pay, and I think maybe for the context of the listeners, what gives you the credibility to make that statement? And I'm kind of opening that as an open question that you have a PhD in a realm around that. So I think that gives you that credibility, but could you just elaborate on that point?
Sure. I have a PhD in marketing from UC Berkeley. I like to say pricing because all of my research and everything was in pricing, but officially it's marketing. When I left university, I took a job teaching at Ohio State. I created a pricing course. I left that and implemented pricing strategies at several different companies. I've started and sold a few companies. I've now written 4 books on pricing. I've blogged on pricing every week since 2010. And I do a podcast like this. And I've been doing it for 7 years now, weekly. So I live the world of pricing. I've been doing it for 30 years.
Just before we went live on air, you asked me, what does your business actually do? And I mentioned it to you. Now, I operate in, admittedly, and most people won't admit this about their business, I operate in a red ocean business. I have dozens of competitors. Typically, the barriers to entry to get into my market are fairly low. You pretty much just need the internet, a couple subscriptions, and then you can scale up and down as much as you want to position your business. And please ask me any questions that you feel are going to really extrapolate this. And I love conversations like this because there's so many viewers that listen in that need these questions asked, but they don't know where to go. For me, what do you think are the most important components of my packages and selling that I need to consider with regards to pricing when I'm going to market?
Yeah. Okay. So this is going to be fascinating. I love this conversation because in truth, it isn't about pricing yet. It's about the buyers. Mm-hmm. Now, the first thing I want you to realize is that every company, every individual has something I call product myopia. You actually think the value is in your product or the value is in your service, and it's not, right? The value is in the result that your buyer achieves. And so when we can start thinking that way, it really changes how we do marketing, how we do pricing, how we do packaging, all of those pieces. And so what we want to do is we want to step back and say, what are those problems that we're truly solving for our customers?
Mm-hmm.
And so here's what I would ask you. In fact, let's do it the easiest way. Let's jump to product first, product myopia. What's your best feature? What's the thing you do better than anyone or the thing that wins you more clients than anything? What's your best feature?
Our best feature is that we buy back founders' time.
Okay, so you're trying to give me a result. That's not a feature of your product. But by the way, I think that's great. I love the way you're thinking. But tell me about your product. What is something that you do from a product perspective that you think this is how we win?
We build leverage through the ecosystems we build. Maybe that's still not answering your question.
So why am I going to hire you and not somebody else? Somebody else can tell me, hey, we buy back founders' time.
Uh-huh.
What makes you better?
What makes us better is that everything we build for partners and clients, we've built, tested ourselves, and we're the living proof of what we've done. Therefore, we're not making up with theory. We build it ourselves, for ourselves, and then bring it to market.
Okay, so you have I'm gonna just restate what you just said. We have a proven methodology. We know for a fact it works. We have evidence that it works. It's not just smoke and mirrors, right? Okay, great. So that's a feature that you have. You have a proven methodology. So here's my question. Why does anybody care? What problem does it solve that you have a proven methodology?
Problem that it solves is ultimately generating new pipeline for businesses that they wouldn't have been able to untap into previously.
Yeah, although that's a true statement, that's not what I was looking for. Let me give you the problem that the feature I just told you solves, right? The problem is there are 100 people out there telling me they can do AI lead generation.
Mm-hmm.
And so who am I going to trust? How am I going to make this decision? This is really hard. And so if I'm going to make this investment, I want to know that it's going to work. And so I'm going to someone with a proven track record. Right? So that's a problem that I have that I say, hey, look, I'm going to go solve the problem this way. And so what you really want to do is learn to think in terms of what are those problems my buyers are really trying to solve. Now, one of the things that you just brought up, and this is a problem that you do solve for your customers, and that is pipeline. Right? We do pipeline generation. So now I'm going to ask, what's that worth to your client?
Typically in a quarter, we're looking at anywhere from $150,000 to $300,000 of anticipated new pipeline that we'll look to pull in for the business.
Yeah, and so for the sake of argument, let's call it $100,000 per month, new pipeline. And so they're going to close, 50% of that? So they're going to get $50,000. They've got margin of 20%. So they're going to get $10,000 in incremental profit for hiring you. That's value. Right? So now we're understanding what does value mean to our customer, because it's truly, when we sell B2B, which you do, value is incremental profit. How much more money are you making your customer? And so we work our way backwards to saying, hey, we want to get to incremental profit, but no one believes you when you walk in and say, hey, I'm going to make you more money. So what do? You walk in and say, hey, I'm going to increase your pipeline. Awesome. So that's a KPI I really care about. That's a result I really care about. Now I'm going to ask you a harder question. Why can't I increase my pipeline myself? What problems do I have that keeps me from increasing pipeline?
Typically what we find is the founders that we talk to, or the businesses we talk to, firstly, they can't do it themselves because they would have done it already. And that often comes down to knowledge and bandwidth. They don't have the team members there to do that for them. And quite often these are founder-led businesses where the founder is focused on the highest leverage activity, not building these systems out for themselves.
Yeah, so you could say that, hey, I don't have the resources to go do this on my own. I'm pretty sure that the demand is out there. Someone has to go find it for me. You could say, oh my God, technology is changing so rapidly. How are we ever going to keep up with it? Why don't we just hire an expert that keeps up with the technology and knows how to use it? Right? And so these are two different problems that you truly solve for people. I don't have the bandwidth to go do this. I don't have the resources to go do this. I don't have the knowledge to go do this. I don't know how to go do this. And so these are problems when we can walk in and say, hey, it isn't just pipeline generation. That is what we're doing. What we're really doing is we're saying, hey, are you getting left behind your competition because you don't know how to do lead generation the most efficient and effective way? And so this is where value comes from.
And thank you for that dissection. And I'm so glad you put me on the spot there. And I guess there was a semi-role play there. And I've had a few of these scenarios before, which fundamentally it's how we learn, how we grow. And it humbles you because I've been able to extrapolate and question and challenge myself, because these aren't the questions that I'm asking myself every single day. These are the questions that you write down at the start of the year, or talking about what features does your product have, or what problem do you solve? What's the value? You feel like you know them, but because you talk to yourself so much with what we do, you circle away and you don't actually answer the question. So with that, why do you think founders struggle so much to answer the questions that you asked me?
Okay, there's lots of different reasons. I'm going to give you a couple of them. One of them is that we're just so focused on what we do, right? It's like, if you think about everything that you do in your job, in running your business, it's almost always, well, how do I tweak my product? Or how many people have bought my product? Or what's the pipeline for my product look like? So everything we do is around our product. And almost nothing we do is built around what are the problems our buyers have that we're going to go solve for them. And I got to tell you, value comes from solving problems. That's the key issue. The second reason is all of us have a really bad case of there we go, curse of knowledge. I was having a senior moment. All of us have a really bad case of the curse of knowledge, which is when we know something so well, we've forgotten what it's like to not know. And so right now, you know AI-based lead gen so well, you walk into someone and you say, hey, do you want AI-based lead gen? And someone else has no idea what that means. Mm-hmm. It's like, what does that do for me? Why do I care? And so what we want to learn to do is always put ourselves in the shoes of the buyer and say, how are they thinking? What's going on in that buyer's mind? And so that's what I tend to do with clients, with people, is we just ask these questions and say, look, what's really going on inside your buyer's mind?
And so that curse of knowledge, which makes absolute sense. For me, at least, and this is what I've heard from a lot of founders, as you mentioned, we understand what we're selling inside and out. But because it feels like there's too much information overload, therefore, when we do go to articulate it, it's like you really struggle. And what I've seen before is when founders place a sales representative into their company, that sales rep actually does better at closing deals because it feels like they're slightly removed. So when you do say the spec of our product or the features and benefits are there, they read off a script. And I see this, admittedly, I've seen this with myself, where because I think I know my product so well, I come away from the straight line. I move so far, I deviate so far away from the beta that by the end of a conversation, people look at you and think, okay, great. You've consulted with me. You've given me so much insight, so much information, but so what? And just to kind of retract and give a really good example, we've got a client that we've been working with for the last 2.5 years. She's such an intelligent, fantastic lady. Her name's Stephanie. She wouldn't mind me mentioning her name. So Stephanie's there, based in Austin, Texas, amazing. But her sales conversion rate is so low that when we were sitting down and talking, we both concluded that it's because she focuses so much of her time on this curse of knowledge that by the end of a call, she'll have an 1.5-hour call, but then there's no clear pathway afterwards. So just kind of giving that back to you, how can founders look at really restructuring their value proposition to impact their pricing to then go back to the course and the right path?
Yeah. So first off, understand when I think of increasing willingness to pay, it does increase pricing. It also increases win rates, right? So what we're really trying to do is communicate our value better to our customers. That's really the goal. And so the question you just asked is, how do I take an hour conversation and communicate what we do to a buyer better? And here's the answer to the question. You have to realize that value is the result of solving problems. And so the result, we need to understand what those are. What are the KPIs that our clients have that we're going to help them move? Right? For your business, we've talked about pipeline, right? Pipeline is a KPI. We might also talk about lead quality or conversion rates, right? So these are KPIs that we might be moving for our clients, and we want to understand what those are. But that's not enough. Where the real influence comes is in helping our buyers understand their problems better than they understood their problems. And so it isn't about, hey, let me tell you what my product does. It's really about, hey, don't you have this problem? Right? So we talk about your business for a second. You go into a potential founder and you say, hey, do you have the resources to learn this AI methodology so that you guys can go do this on your own? Because in truth, AI has all this knowledge and it's going to be able to find your leads for you. And he's like, no, I don't have that. I don't have that. Do you have someone in-house where we could train them? And they're like, no, I don't have that. Okay, would you like a service where we could just give that to you? And so what we're doing is we're helping buyers understand what's the problem that they truly have. And that is where the influence comes from.
How much of a game changer would it be for your business if you could learn from the same AI advisors as Tony Robbins, or the people who've been in close proximity to Dan Sullivan, famously the co-author of 10x is easier than 2x. Today's sponsor to the podcast is AI Simplifier. They have put together a 30-day roadmap program to help teach you how to implement AI into your business. They've helped people save 10 to 20 hours per week, add millions of dollars in additional revenue to businesses. And for those who listen to this podcast and decide to sign up with them, you will get a complimentary AI breakthrough session with Steve French, one of the co-founders, and myself to really pencil in and figure out what we can do with your business. Now, back to the episode. Taking it back a few steps, pre-semi-retirement, pre-PhD, what got you into pricing?
Okay. 8 years old. Is that fair? 8 years old. I remember going to the grocery store with my mother and I would see prices that ended in nines and I just didn't get it. It's like, why is 69? Why is 99? I don't understand. Do companies think we're stupid? Right? We know 99 is $1. And so fast forward to my doctoral program and I had a chance to play with scanner panel data. This is the data that grocery stores collect when we use our loyalty cards. And I was able to test whether this 9-cent thing really works or not. It turns out it does. And it works because we are lazy subtractors. But I became so addicted to understanding how people use prices to make decisions. That's what really got me into this. I love understanding how people think.
I went to Ibiza 5 years ago. I was on a boat cruise to an island, I think it's called Fortementera, something along those lines. Anyways, point being is we were there talking to the owner of this boat, and he said to us, the boat was 99 euros. And he said, when I turn around and I push our prices up to 100 euros, we lose a minimum of 10,000 euros every single summer. So I just keep it at 99 euros.
Isn't it amazing? So you asked me why do companies do it? And the answer is really easy. Because it works. Right? Now, when you want to understand why it works and when it works and how it works, typically what happens is we compare products. And so when we compare products, we compare prices, which means we're truly subtracting prices. And so if we're subtracting a price, then we tend to just subtract left-hand digits and we ignore right-hand digits. And so that's why the 9-cent thing says, or the 9 thing says, hey, I'm going to be able to make more when you're subtracting the price this way. There's also these real cliffs, like 99 to 100 looks like a big investment, looks very different when people are making that investment. But can I give you one more that's really fascinating? Products that end in round numbers, so 00, tend to be higher quality. When I was getting my PhD, I would go shopping and actually just collect prices and price endings. And one of the things I found that was truly fascinating to me is when you walk into a shoe store, there is a price point at which the shoes stop being 99s or 95s and become round numbers, right? So it's like $99, $119, $250, $300. And so it truly is, these round numbers are indicating higher quality to us.
So where do you think the cross section is, the point, the inflection point where it goes from price sensitivity or working towards the second digit psychology of 99 to actually we're signaling quality? Is it $250 or whereabouts does that fall?
I'm sure that's different for every single product,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm not going to charge $250 for candy. So I can tell you that all of my prices, every time I price something, it's always just a round number. Here's what I charge. And so it kind of says, hey, it's high quality. He's confident in his prices. I can give you the last one, the last piece you really want to know, and that is if you're gonna write a proposal, then use random digits at the end
Could
because
you give us an
that looks
example?
like it's sure. So my contract with this thing, which I'm going to do 7 different pieces of, and I've got a whole bunch of different line items, and the total comes out to $73,852. And why is that? Because it looks like it was carefully calculated. Doesn't matter if I guessed at it or not. It looks like it was carefully calculated.
I remember reading pricing structures previously, and interestingly, we won a project a couple months ago, and I think we very, very, very intentionally did our pricing, and I was really proud because we anchored the prospect to our highest package, and I think the pricing was 7750 and then 9450, and I wanted to make the price increment feel close enough that they were just anchored to the top package, the bells and whistles, so to speak. And I was very intentional with that pricing. Maybe I could have shifted it a little bit. But how is pricing different between direct consumer, B2C, and B2B?
So it turns out when we think about buyers' decisions, consumers often don't understand why they buy things, and it's often very emotional. So if you think, you've probably heard the phrase, people buy emotionally and justify it logically. And so that's pretty accurate when we think about consumer type purchases. If you go to a B2B type purchase, it's the exact opposite, right? And so the individual employees inside a company act like consumers, as in, hey, I'm going to make this decision because it makes me look good, because I'm doing my job better, because I like the product, I like the salesperson. There's a whole bunch of emotional stuff going on. But in the end, someone says, what's the business case? There's a committee of people that are trying to decide what's the right decision to go make here. And so businesses tend to take the emotion out and make sure the logic stays in. At least they try to. That's also the purpose behind RFPs, is we're trying to make it a logical decision, no emotional part of it. So we want to make it as good a decision as we possibly can. And so when I think about B2B, we had mentioned this a second ago, but in B2B, value is incremental profit. And when you can take your product, your service, your solutions, and say, here's how we're going to help you make more money, that's the logic piece. That's the 80% piece, and that's what really matters. The better you can do that, the better, the higher the price you can charge, the more deals you're going to win. In the consumer world, we tend not to focus so much on how much more money am I going to make you. I mean, it doesn't work that way, but we tend to do a lot of statistical analysis and, what's the average price someone is willing to pay. And so there's a lot more stats in B2C than there is in B2B.
Just trying to take that back for a moment, is that just purely because in a B2B realm, the objective is pretty logical. It's whatever you're doing in a B2B transaction, there's a value creation there, which is often tied to an ROI in some form or another. But then with direct consumer, and typically we only make purchases because we want to experience emotional benefits. I buy this coffee here because I want to feel good. I'm not really thinking about the long-term ROI of I'm buying this coffee. This is going to make me more effective, more efficient with my work. Is that pretty much plain and simple in layman's terms what you're saying?
That's absolutely what I'm saying. When we think about the consumer side, consumers or value actually comes in three different places.
Okay.
Right. So we get social benefit, we get identity or emotional benefit, and we get functional benefit. Right. So those are the three places we're really going to get it. Social, emotional, and functional. And so social is, hey, this makes me look good. That's why I drive a Ferrari, right? It makes me look good.
That's a nice
Emotional, I don't, by the way. Emotional is, I love how this coffee makes me feel. And then functional is when I drink my coffee, it keeps me awake and I get more work done.
And from, if you've looked at this research, which I'm hazarding a guess you have you found there's been a disproportionate propensity amongst the direct consumer side of where people are willing to spend based off of social status versus functional overall, it's all relatively the same?
So can I say I haven't seen that shift at all, but I can tell you, I haven't seen the research, let me say it that way. But I'm also positive that it's very product specific or product category specific, right? So some people care a ton about function and some products just feed that. And some products really feed social, emotional. I'm not exactly sure why people buy perfume today other than social or emotional. I guess maybe it helps you get a mate. Maybe, I don't know. Right.
That's it's so funny you say that because I was in Harrods about 2 months ago with my partner. She loves perfume, got more perfume than I understand why a human needs it. And I thought to myself, wow, people were coming to these stores paying £200, £300, £400 for a smell which vanishes in, I don't know, 8 hours. And if you go to the gym, you might as well not even put it on. And I thought, what are people actually paying for? Because you and I, you can't smell me right now. Probably a good thing, actually. But in person, what is it about perfume? And I think especially amongst women and certain social classes, I don't want to just put it down to one gender, although I do think women care more about aftershave perfume than men. But what is it about that? And when I was thinking about it, for me, there's no real function, there's no real utility. It's pure status, in my view, when I look at perfume. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, first off, I agree with you that I can't see the function unless it's to help me win a mate, right? So then it has function. But the other two that we talked about, social and emotional. So social is status, right? It makes me look good. It makes me, hey, I'm wearing $200 perfume. And then the other one is emotional. And I think emotional really matters because, hey, when I smell good, I feel good. It makes me feel much better about myself. Right. I'm dressed way better than you are today. No offense, Joe. But I could say, hey, when I'm wearing these shirts, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel more confident. It makes me, and so that could be an emotional thing that matters to people.
How much of a game changer would it be for your business if you could learn from the same AI advisors as Tony Robbins or the people who've been in close proximity to Dan Sullivan, famously the co-author of 10x is easier than 2x. Today's sponsor to the podcast is AI Simplifier. They have put together a 30-day roadmap program to help teach you how to implement AI into your business. They've helped people save 10 to 20 hours per week, add millions of dollars in additional revenue to businesses. And for those who listen to this podcast and decide to sign up with them, you will get a complimentary AI breakthrough session with Steve French, one of the co-founders, and myself, to really pencil in and figure out what we can do with your business. Now, back to the episode. And it's so interesting. It's the classic example. You go in, try out some clothes. The guy in the store saying, "You look really good in that." Lady's there trying her perfume. You smell so good. That is definitely your scent. And look, we know there's a bias towards saying what people want to hear as opposed to actually saying the truth. And look, it may be true, but it's so fascinating that most of this is, as you said, made up of status and emotion, and I suppose it's perception. It's interesting. I have just finished reading The Art of Spending Money by Morgan Housel. If you've read his first book, The Psychology of Money, definitely books I would recommend, just talking about money. And it was interesting. He uses the example of, he used to work as a doorman at a hotel back when he was 19. Very high-end hotel. And he said that a gentleman was there and he was bragging about the fact that he paid $24,000 for an armchair. And he just said, and everyone just looked at him like, what? And he said, "Listen, guys, it's just what you do when you have money." And essentially he tied back, because I was trying to understand money better. Maybe that's why this conversation really sprung out to me and tied into what I was subconsciously looking at previously. But I was thinking to myself, and it helps me understand that for some people, value is getting an expensive coffee. For others, it's having that Ferrari that you said you've got parked up outside your house, or having a really nice shirt that you're wearing right now. And it's interesting that the economy and society has been structured in a way that helps people lean in to what really emotionally drives them as things pass. I'm just curious, just throwing it out there, what are your thoughts on the way how society is structured nowadays in order to extrapolate as much economic income from people?
Okay, so now we're going to talk about things that I am not an expert at all, right? My world is focused on how is it that buyers make decisions, and how is it that we can, make our own decisions around that. But if I were thinking about the environment, the economy, et cetera, it just feels to me like companies have gotten so good at convincing people they need things they don't need. And so what we're really doing is we're saying, hey, you tell me what your budget is, and I'm going to push you up to your budget plus a little more so that you can go into debt. Right? I'm going to push you so that you spend every dime you possibly can. And that's really what, especially in the B2C world, that's really what it feels like to me. And now I don't mean that in any negative way, because a company's job is to figure out, how do I sell more of my product? And we never force anybody to buy anything. We've just gotten so good at marketing and selling that we're convincing people to buy beyond what they need or really should be buying.
So true. I refuse to take out or subscribe to any buy now, pay later schemes. Klarna, I'm not too sure if you have them in the States, but anything like that, I've refused. I always say to myself, if I can't afford whatever I'm buying, I don't know, up to a few $100s 10 times over, I'm not paying for it. I'm not going into debt for anything, because I just think it's a very, very slippery slope. And typically they're system schemes that, I don't want to say they prey on the lowest socioeconomic class in society. However, they're most used by them. So yeah, I guess it's all about profit maximization, and companies rarely care that you'll be willing to go into debt to pay for their product. There was a really interesting.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to throw in there, I rarely get annoyed at companies and things they do. I mean, sometimes I just say that was stupid. But one thing that really bugs me is the credit card companies going to colleges and getting students to take out credit cards. I'm just like, that just starts a horrible life.
Why do you think, apart from naturally profit maximization, why do you think these companies are so bullish, gung-ho on doing that?
Well, so let me put a positive spin on it for a second. We're offering credit to people that we think have a future earning potential and the ability to pay it back, right? So I think that's a reasonable positive spin. And in fact, a book I just finished reading, I dearly loved it, was called Die with Zero. And Die with Zero is all about how what we want to do is learn how to maximize our experiences over our lifetime. And if you think about it, when you're in college, you have no money. By the way, it takes three things to have an experience: time, money, and health. Right? When you're in college, you've got time and health, but no money.
Mm-hmm.
So what if you could borrow money then, have your experiences, and then pay it back later when you start to have more money? And so, yeah, I could make a legitimate argument, but I have to say it doesn't work that way, right? We end up putting people in debt, and it's just so hard for them to get out of it.
Yeah, it's so true. And you look at, I mean, I've studied marketing the last 10, 12 years. You look at perfume brands, take that as an example. How do you market a smell? You can't through a screen. So what do? You position an idealistic or unidealistic life of a very attractive couple kissing, smelling each other in Sicily or somewhere like that. And then credit cards, they attach their facility to those experiences. That's the only way how they're logically going to sell that as an effective bridge. It's the most tried and tested method. The question I really wanted to ask you that just sprung to mind is, in your opinion, and the world of offers has really emerged. There were Russell Brunson, David Ogilvy, many great copywriters, marketers, but the one person who for me really extenuated this was Alex Hormozy, if you're familiar with him. So what I want to ask you is, how influential do you think offers are in the pricing matrices that you talk about?
I'm going to answer that in a couple different ways, if I may.
Please, yeah.
Right. So there's a whole field of behavioral economics. And behavioral economics is, how is it that people make irrational decisions? But I'm going to change that slightly to say, how is it that we can influence decisions with ways that have nothing to do with the value of the product or the value of what we're offering? And so that's where I would place what you're talking about as the offer. One of my favorite lines: bald men don't buy combs. Right? I don't care how you structure the offer. I don't care how you package it. I don't care what you say. You're not going to get a bald man to buy a comb, right? Because he just doesn't have the problem, and there is just no value there. So value is the meat. The offer is the seasoning on top of the meal, right? So how is it that we're going to influence what people think and see and do? And so, yeah, I think that absolutely matters, but I think we put way too much emphasis on that and not enough emphasis on what's the real value we're delivering to our customers. The way you present that value is huge. And I think that's where the biggest opportunity is for people, even though we focus way too much on the seasoning and not on the meal.
So the meal is the value, the seasoning is the offer.
Yes. That's how I would look at it.
And why do you think so many people are now just hyper fixated on offers as opposed to actually value?
Because they're tactics we can talk about and teach, and they work across a wide variety of products. So you can say, hey, did you do your good, better, best offer? Hey, are you doing anchoring? Hey, are you doing the decoy effect? And so these are things that we can teach, and people can use those, and they work somewhat across everything. When I think about value, I have to think about your company, right? What's the value that you deliver to your clients? And you're so stuck on your product that you can't see what that value is. I can teach you the behavioral economics tactics. I can't teach you. Well, I can. It just takes a long time to think about value the way your buyers do.
It's interesting because I sat down with two younger founders than me recently, and by all accounts, their marketing's working very well. They were talking about how many clients they're signing up every week and how they had to put a pause on the system. And then and they said to me, it all comes down to our offer, naturally, to get people through the door. He said, all we did is we tweaked the messaging in our offers. But then the alarming point that came to me was the lack of results they're actually achieving for their clients, which said to me, they've got all of the seasoning they need. They've got everything there to pull people in, but the real value that's going to be sustainable, hopefully, I really hope for them, they'll fix their system and their structure and their process, but the actual value is built on weak foundations.
Yeah, it's a sad state. It's like I've convinced a bald man to buy a comb.
Shifting gears slightly, books. I'm a massive reader. I proudly have read every single day for the last 6 and a bit years, all types of books. Talk to me about yours. I know you've got one in the works for this summer. Tell us a little bit about impact pricing, other books that you've written, and just delve into that there. I'm really intrigued by what you've written.
Yeah, so I've published 4 books so far, and I've got 2 in the works right now with a couple that are following them behind that as well. Yeah, and I do this because I love it. My latest book, the one that I'm most thrilled with right now, is called Buyer Disconnect: Why Smart Companies Lose Winnable Deals. And a lot of it has to do with what we've been talking about today. It has to do with the fact that we love our products so much. We talk about our products so much. I'm going to put myself in your shoes. I'm not saying you do this, but I could walk into a client and say, "Oh my God, we're using the latest version of Claude, and we have this incredible prompt that we've built. You got to see this prompt, and it's going to go out and it's going to find all these leads for you." And so what we're doing is we're talking about our product. And what people really care about, you've heard me say this 100 times now today, what people really care about are, what are the problems I have that you're going to solve? And what are the results I'm going to achieve because you solve those problems? And so this whole book is about what are the things companies do to make it harder for people to buy. Because if you think about it, every time someone buys something, what they're buying is a prediction of the future. I hire you because next month I hope to have more leads, right? I'm predicting the future. So what does my future look like? And so now here's a really interesting question. We're horrible at predicting the future. How do we make a decision between whether we should buy something or not, or which one we should buy? Because everything is a prediction of the future. And the answer to that question is confidence. How confident am I in your solution? And that confidence has 3 huge components to it. Those 3 components are payoff. So think of that as value. Probability. What's the likelihood I'm actually going to get that? And regrets. If I don't get it, how bad will I feel? How much trouble will I be in? And so those 3 components truly drive the way people make decisions. And now my favorite part of the whole story, when you can help buyers understand their problems, you actually improve all 3 of those judgments. You improve a buyer's perception of their payoff, you improve a buyer's belief that you can solve their problem, and you improve the likelihood that they're not going to regret this. Or if it doesn't go well, that they've got good justification for why they did what they did. So you'll hear me talk about problems more than anything else. Okay, so I'm sorry, that was me ranting about a book that I love. My apologies.
Where do you think founders or salespeople go wrong the most in their sales process from your observation?
Without a doubt, because they want to sell their own product. They're talking about their product. They think that... let's go back to the curse of knowledge for just a second, if I may. My favorite example of the curse of knowledge is you can probably walk into Best Buy and pick out a computer that's going to do your job for you, right? This is going to work well for me. What if your grandfather walks into a Best Buy and is buying his very first computer and someone starts reading specifications to him? What he's really thinking is, yeah, but can I see my grandkids over the interwebs? Right? He's got a problem he wants to solve. He has no idea what your features do for him. And that's really where we are. When we talk about our products, we're saying, hey, Mr. Customer, Mr. Buyer, would you take my feature and try to translate that into your future? And what we need to learn to do is talk about our buyers' futures so that they understand that we can deliver those.
I have to admit, I fall into that trap so many times where I just talk about the features, or I can just go down a rabbit hole where I talk so much about what we have to offer. And I think, and it's never from a bad or poorly intended place. It's a place of trying to prove yourself. It's a place of, hey, look, I'm willing to lift the hood on what we have and actually show you how good I think it is. It's looking at the Ferrari and saying, look at this engine. And quite honestly, most people are just looking and thinking, unless you're a car buff, okay, it's an engine. They want to know, how quickly can you get me to the destination? That's really what they're looking at. And are you going to do it safely? And what's the likelihood we're going to crash? And as long as you can say, well, hey, look, this is the guarantee that these things are going to happen or whatnot, then that's where we look to. So I must admittedly say, and I really hope that anyone who is listening to this and feeling as though maybe they're overselling, probably the best way of saying it, that they can just deconstruct everything. So just in that lane, humbly promote, brag, however you want to put it. I'm there. I've listened to what you've said. In your 8 series, soon to be 8 series, Harry Potter collection, where do I start and why?
So if you were going to read my books, I would say my favorite book is the third one right now. It's called Selling Value. And so it starts to talk about what does value actually mean to a customer. And when you can read that and truly understand it, now you're moving down the right path of here's how I communicate this to customers. You learn to have a value conversation. Then I would jump to my next book, the one that I'm publishing, or Buy or Disconnect right now. I think that's the one that I would, probably because I'm so enamored with this book right now. It's just, I've had so many ahas while I was writing it. So it's just been such a fun experience for me.
What was one of the most notable ahas?
I think when I said the words, all buying is a prediction of the future, that was like, oh God, it is so true.
All buying is a prediction of the future. Expand on that for us. What do you mean?
All buying is a prediction of the future. So let's imagine that you go to the hardware store and you buy a drill. And you're standing in front of the hardware store and you're holding the drill in your hand. How much value have you gotten from that drill so far? Zero.
Really nothing.
Right? You don't get value until you take it home and drill a hole someplace. Mm-hmm. Right? Now you're getting value. So you just bought a drill because you're predicting what you're going to do with it in the future. Mm-hmm. Every time you buy something, you're doing the exact same thing. If I hire you, what I'm really doing is I'm predicting what my future will look like after you put your AI magic together. If you buy one of my books, what you're doing is you're predicting, hey, this is the experience I'm going to have as I read this book, or what I'm going to learn from it. All buying is a prediction of the future. To me, when I first said that or realized that, it's like, oh God, that is so true. And it changes everything.
And it is so true. When you really dissect that statement, all buying is a prediction of the future. And I was just thinking, if I buy a coffee, I'm predicting that I'm going to drink that coffee. We're talking about such trivial examples: a drill, a coffee, expertise. You're predicting and putting a bet on deriving some level of value and benefit there. I want to just kind of get a lens on everything you've studied and looked at, away from your books, your literature, which any links we want to put into the show notes, send it across and we'll add them there so people can find those relevant resources. What would be your top 3 book recommendations if someone wanted to understand buying, selling, negotiating, just anything around that offer? Someone wants to level up in that space.
So I think it was Chris Voss's book
Never Split
on
the
negotiating. Never Split the Difference. Loved that book. That was amazing. Mm-hmm. Madhavan Ramanujan has a phenomenal book called Monetizing Innovation.
Okay. I've never heard of that book.
Really, really good book. And I don't have a third one that I would pop off the top of my head and say, wow, that's really... Well, I should give huge kudos. Tom Nagel's The Strategy and Tactics of Pricing. He's only got 7 or 8 versions of it out there now, or editions. But that's just a phenomenal documentation on pricing.
Amazing. Mark, what's next for you and where can people find you?
So the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm easy. I publish constantly on LinkedIn. And always feel free to send me an email if you want, mark@impactpricing.com.
And we haven't mentioned it, but your podcast, 808 episodes. Please elaborate to everyone. What can they expect if they were to tune into your podcast?
So I do two different versions of my podcast each week. So the first version, it comes out on Monday, is me interviewing somebody. And the interview is just whatever I feel like. I mean, it's almost always pricing related, or it's how do buyers make decisions, somewhere in that realm. But it's me being curious and asking questions that I want to know answers to. And then the second one comes out on Thursday, and it's my COO, Rebecca. She reads one of my blogs because I've blogged every week since 2010. So she just reads one of my blogs, and so it's a way for people who don't want to read and rather listen to the blog, they can hear.
Amazing. Well, look, we'll share them to the listeners as well. Mark, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you.
Joe, it's truly been fun. Thank you very much for the great questions.
I try. Thank you.